So business intelligence is a capacity to obtain non-public information, documents which are not disclosed by the Commission. So it's somewhere spying between brackets and with small character. And this is a very important part of activity of lobbyists to obtain the information. I told you in particular that I am very involved in the hidden powers, this very opaque regulation, and here you need business intelligence to obtain the documents which are not public. It's a very, very important part of activity. Of course, this spying between brackets has to be organized in a legal way. It's out of question to rob documents or to buy documents. But you have techniques and networks and relations which give you the possibility to obtain this document. Because again, secrecy is an absolute concept, but confidentiality is a relative one. And for you, something very confidential is not confidential for the user, and this is the way to collect that document. So when you have all this information, you have to define the strategy. And here, you need experience. Strategy is the art of lobbying. So I have a problem. Is it possible for me to have a positive evolution? How can I organize my coalition? Who's against me? Would favorable to my opinion? And what will be my approach, defensive or more proactive? And we'll have to organize a very diplomatic lobbying, very polite, or do I have to act as a warrior and to be very tough? This is the strategy. And for that, again, you need experience. And the strategy then is divided in several segments. The first segment is a network, the networking. Of course, you cannot work with 50,000 people in Brussels. You have to identify who are the key guys for you at the different level of the institutions. You have to organize a lobbying. Lobbying is really the action. You meet the civil servants, you meet the ministers, you meet members of the parliament, and also communication. Again, the more the system is complex, the more you have to communicate properly. It's very, very essential. Communication is very important. And you see that you have arrows to join the different pillars, showing a coherence and an interaction. In other terms, if you have a good information but a bad strategy, it will not work. If you have a good strategy but a bad communication, it will not work. And you see here already that lobbying is very based on competencies. You can in Brussels read a dossier with a small budget and a small staff, and you can lose a dossier with a big budget and a big staff. This is the system is very, very different than the system in the US, and perhaps we can say a word about that. You know, in the US, they wash whiter than white, if I can say, in terms of ethics. So when you are a lobbyist in the US, you have a big compliance system, and you have procedures. You have to disclose what you do, how much you spend, who you meet, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, you are the sponsor of all political campaigns, so you sponsor presidential election, you sponsor the local election, so you have the cash box in the middle of the system, and the richer you are, the more influential you are, let's say the thing bluntly. Here in Brussels, you have no regulation, which is somewhere a pity, because personally I am favorable to a regulation for lobbying, because it's a job very sensitive. But on the other hand, you have no political sponsorship. Never try even to invite a member of the parliament for a weekend, or to invite a civil servant to the opera, or to give money for this or that. This don't exist. So corruption is not an issue in Brussels. We have sometimes some cases, but which are extremely, extremely marginal. So globally, the system is clean in Brussels, and your efficiency is really based on your competencies and not on the money you can leverage for influence. A few questions, perhaps, regarding the ethical dimension of lobbying.
I'm just discussing this today. Maybe we should go around the table. You should tell Daniel what your topics are, because we do this Yes.
Yes,
You
yes.
start.
Okay, I'm looking at the Transparency Register in comparison to Australia and the US and their registers.
This is a very good matter, by the way. I am the opponent number one to the transparency. Yes, I am the opponent number one to the transparency register, and I will tell you why. So you can quote me in your dissertation, no problem. I said it, this is coming from Commissioner Callas. He's still there, but with the portfolio. And I said it. What I will tell you, I tell this to Mr. Callas himself. I was invited by the trainees of the Commission. Callas was also invited, so I had with Callas a debate on the Transparency Initiative in front of 500 trainees. Callas was very angry against me, I must say. He was red like a tomato. But the reason why I'm against the Transparency Register is for several reasons. The first reason for me, first, is not a priority, and I believe that the Commission has first to clean in front of his own door. Then after, they can take care about us. So, for the Commission, for instance, you have what we call the revolving doors. So you have members of the Commission who are leaving the Commission and joining interest groups, or you have commissioners who are doing the same. Recently, you have had a case which is for me extremely shocking. Mr. Petit, head of the European Legal Service. So when you are the head of the legal service of the Commission, this is one of the most important positions. And you know everything about everything and about everyone. And Mr. Petit has left the Commission to join one of the main law firms in the world, P4Chance, and also dealing with litigation issues, which is for me absolutely unacceptable. When I said that to Callas, he spent 10 minutes to answer, yes, that was confidential clause, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. Not convinced at all. So this is the reason why the Commission has first to clean in front of his own door and to bring also more transparency in the circulation of the documents. The second reason why I am against is because it's a non-mandatory, it's a non-obligatory registry. So I have no obligation to register. And I don't understand why this register is not mandatory. If this register is so good, it has to be mandatory. Otherwise, why to register? So the Commission is putting pressure on the lobbies. Well, you have to register. If you don't register, we'll blame you, and we don't receive the documents. But I don't mind about that. I am not registered. I don't intend to register. I have no problem to maneuver in the institution. I have no problem to obtain the information. The third reason why I am against the register is because you can manipulate in the register. You have to disclose the reality, but you have many possibilities if you wish not to register a client, not to register a contract, to register more than you do, less than you do. So it's absolutely not no rigor in the management of this register. And the fourth reason why I am against is because this will be a weapon in the hands of civil society, not governmental organizations. What we will see is very clear. We'll see anti-tobacco networks. They will take the register and they will say, well, Philip Morris International is spending how many millions, and Japan Tobacco, how many, and British American Tobacco, how many, and they will say, oh my God, can you imagine tobacco industries are spending 10 or 15 million euros in lobbying in Brussels, this is a shame, blah, blah, blah. You will see the green NGOs will do the same for pesticides or genetically modified organisms. And they will say, well, Bayer and Dow Chemicals are spending millions for genetically modified organisms, and be poor WWF or poor Greenpeace who have no money, which is not true, by the way. So, again, manipulation. And the fifth reason why I'm against is because the lawyers are excluded from the register. And you see, as I have said, that lobbying is more and more legal, and that the lawyers are becoming more and more lobbyists. And these guys are out of the register, so they have nothing to disclose. And it's absolutely unfair, because again, some companies will choose to give their lobbying dossiers to a law firm simply because that they will not have to disclose activity in the register. For all these reasons, I am totally against. What is your opinion? You can tell me what you think yourself.
I pretty much agree with that. Like, I did a big bit on my presentation about regulations on parliamentary members and how there's no restrictions and a bit of corruption, and yeah, I'm anti the register.
Okay, so what is the subject of the second student with the blue?
I study the emission trading scheme and how, especially Climate Action Network Europe, how they try to influence the trading scheme.
Yes, it's an interesting subject which is linked to the organization of non-governmental organization.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can speak a little bit about that. When I was in sugar, for instance, in the 80s, beginning of 90s, or again for this period of Uruguay round negotiations, the NGOs were already in Brussels, but they were absolutely non-influential because they were badly organized and they have made a lot of progress in their organization. First, they recruit experts, they recruit senior people. Well, I have had recently to work on a dossier for floors, floorings, carpets and floors with WWF Europe, and I met the desk officer or the policy officer, if you wish, who is in charge of this question at WWF office, and she was a relatively young 30 years old, but she had a doctorate in biochemistry, so they recruit a high-level person with PhD and so. Second, they are very well organized because Climate Action Network is part of the G10 group. So the G10 is the 10 major environment organizations in Brussels. So you have Climate Action Networks, you have WWF, you have Greenpeace, you have Friends of the Earth, you have European Environment Bureau, you have several like that, and they are extremely influential and very well organized. They meet every month, and they are specialized. Climate Action Network is in climate, when WWF is more in fisheries or forestries. Greenpeace is very much in nuclear and genetically modified organisms. But it's a very, very brilliant organization. And the panorama of the NGOs in Brussels is organized around the European Society Contact Group, and they have 8 pillars. The first pillar is a G10 for environment, then they have a social pillar, they have a development pillar, they have an education pillar, they have an health pillar, they have a women's rights pillar, a human rights pillar, and a women's rights pillar, a cultural pillar, and an education pillar. So it's covering and very specialized and coordinated with this contact point structure. It's very, very brilliant. They are very well listened by the Commission. They are sponsored also and financed by the Commission, which is for me non-shocking. I think it's the democratics and the civil society will be funded by public funds. I have no problem with that. But they are generally doing well, and I think much better than the trade association. If I have to evaluate the performance of the business associations compared to the green associations, I believe that the green are better. They are more equipped, the leaders are more leaders, they are more leadership, the teams are good, and they are, I think, doing very well. When the business association gives me the impression to be again extremely shy and ever hesitating to complain against the Commission and to fight for that dossier. Okay, good. And the third one?
I'm researching the Bologna process, so higher education policies, which is not an EU activity actually. And in my work, I work in EU funding, namely the international cooperation projects, which is more connected to the EU.
Yeah, here I have nothing to comment. I'm sorry. So next.
Okay, so I'm doing on EU youth policies and the role of EU youth organization with a case study on the Erasmus for All financial framework.
Okay. But my only comment here, to go back to France, I don't know if you are aware of that, Pascaline, but can you imagine that the French young people now are not enough to fulfill the French quota for Erasmus? There is a lack of candidates.
But actually it's not that much promoted in France.
Okay.
Yeah, really.
It's not promoted enough in France, apparently.
I think so.
Yeah. Even when I was 20 years old, I was traveling a lot. So when I see that the French are reluctant to take an Erasmus program, I mean, it's understandable.
Yeah, I agree.
So the next.
I'm looking at trade associations, well, trade unions specifically, particularly in Southern Africa, the distinct relationship that South Africa itself has with the European Union, and also its influence within the ACP states. However, is not a signatory of the EPAs because of the Trade and Development Cooperation Association, I think. And I looked at, I think I saw it's an ACT SA group that basically it's based in London that I saw, and how it's trying to rather speak on behalf of the Southern African countries, particularly in ACP and the SADC region, and how, you know, there's a strong rejection to the EPAs, as well as the ITUC, which is the International Trade Unions, I think.
Well, what I can comment on that is that, again, lobbying is changing very much. I have worked a lot with ACP countries, of course, when I was sugar, because ACP has a big sugar quota. And also with South Africa. I have had recently contact with the South African embassy for problems of meat imports and meat regulations. And we see more and more how the technical regulations are complex. And I think these lobbies, ACP in particular, are, in my opinion, very, very obsolete. Because they are working at political level, but they are very much neglecting the technical background of the dossiers. And again, as I have said already, the power in Brussels more and more belongs to the low-level civil servant. And the low-level civil servant is not interested by political consideration. He is interested by facts and figures. And so the legal dimension, the capacity to understand in which procedure we are, and the capacity to bring technical arguments is very, very important now. More than to have big conferences with a big number of people about generalities. And when I met the embassy of South Africa for meat, they were explaining to me that their Ministry of Agriculture in Johannesburg is asking information about the way that the imports are organized at EU level and all the regulations for food safety and so, which is a hell of complexity. But I told them that I'm ready to help, so no problem. If you want to involve PACT European Affairs in the South African business in Europe, we can do that.
Thank you.
Next.
Well, I'm just talking about environmental lobbying in general and how they influence public opinion.
Speak in the microphone because I don't hear.
Oh, yeah, I'm just saying that I'm just talking about the environmental lobbying in general and how they influence public opinion.
And what is your conclusion?
I'm still.
She's still working on it.
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
I
have no conclusion so far.
At EU level or generally?
At the EU level?
Yes. Well, first at the national level, and then at the supranational level.
But again, I'm not a specialist in environment at all, I must say. But I am again disappointed by the EU policy, which I find on one hand too ambitious and on the other end too vague. You know, in the EU, they have a big ambition for reduction of the CO2 emissions. It's a famous 20-20-20, a diminution of CO2 emission by 20% in 2020, diminution of consumption of electricity of 20%, and contribution of 20% of renewable energies, and in particular for electricity. The problem here is that we have these big ambitions, but they are never fulfilled. We put ambitious targets, but they are never achieved. And regarding the decrease of CO2 emissions, we are exactly at the same level as we were in 1990, which is not a bad result, by the way, because we have rate growth and so. But we have big ambitions, and the result is very poor. And also, the discussions are very, very complex, and we don't see clear line. On top of it, you know, it's very difficult, again, to have an environmental policy when you are in a global system, because you have environmental constraints when the US have far less environmental constraints, or the Japanese even less, or the Indian not at all. So this is also a big problem for the EU, where it's a wishy-washy system somewhere. They want everything and the contrary of everything somewhere. We want an environment policy, but we don't want to negotiate at international level. We don't want to ask environmental criteria. For me, it's absolutely compulsory. If you develop a very strong environmental policy, you need to have penalties at the border if you import products which have been produced without no environmental concerns. This was the idea of Sarkozy, which was for once a good idea, by the way, was to create a border, European border, with a carbon tax. So you have a very limited carbon emission, so you don't pay the tax. You have a very heavy carbon emission, you pay the tax. But of course, if you wait to have an international agreement worldwide through United Nations, you can wait long. Go somewhere again, be necessary to accept risk and to fight for success. When I see again your generation, if I may have a more general comment, I think that for me a crisis is a resource. Crisis is good, you have to accept it. Right? It's good. But now for everybody and the young generation of, in particular, crisis is a dirty world again. It's a dirty world, never be in disagreement with no one, never complain about nothing, and never fight against nothing and no one. And this is why we have a so weak leadership, and this is why we cannot express really no interest in front of international. So the last subject is...
I'm looking at TÜSİAD, the Turkish Industry and Business Association, and
Turkish
Industry and Business Association.
Yeah.
You have to say it again because I don't think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, TÜSİAD.
What is that?
I was just saying I was looking at TÜSİAD, the Turkish Industry and Business Association, and what I think the direction I'd like to go in is to look at the role of civil society and business groups, especially from a non-EU member state on the Turkish accession process, if it is having any impact at all, or how does, I guess, TÜSİAD look at itself as being involved in the European Union.
But you think that Turkey will join the EU?
I don't think that I have an. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't see it happening in the
Near future.
Yeah, in the near future. But I think it's interesting to look at how, I guess, other private groups are positioning themselves in the EU. But framing.
I like very much Turkey. I know quite well Turkey. I've been often. And anytime I go to Turkey, I'm very impressed by the development of the country and the quality of business or leaders, if you wish. And again, I am in a real disagreement with the attitude of the EU regarding Turkey. Personally, I am against enlargement. I think the way the system is organized, it's impossible to imagine Turkey as a member of the EU in its present configuration. because imagine that the EU will join, so it will be the 29th member. So you know it's not an EU, it's a Babel Tower. So we bring a new country with 80 million inhabitants, with you know, to aggregate a big part with the system which is not working properly. You know, the system was, EU was able to work with 12 countries. Above 12, it was not manageable. So you can imagine with 29 countries and Turkey how we can work. But on the contrary, I strongly believe that Turkey is a fundamental asset in the European construction. We need absolutely to have a very, very, very strong partnership, and even more than that. Personally, I don't see the Turkey member of the Council of Ministers or member of the Commission. I see clearly Turkey being part of the single market, having access with no custom tariff, a free circulation of goods, citizens, people, students, immigration, free between Turkey and the EU. It's a very important project. Same for the south flank of Mediterranean, same for Maghreb, same for Morocco and Tunisia and Algeria. It absolutely be ambitious here, simply because our population is becoming aged. So we need to have newcomers, young generation. We need to have young generation working for us. So we have also to help for education, for infrastructure. Again, it's a lack of ambition. It's terrible. Same for Iran. Iran is a key country, and when you see now the bloc Turkey, Iran, Iraq, you know, it's a big zone emerging. It's absolutely fundamental to be part of that. And now the trend again is to exclude Iraq and to be very reluctant regarding Turkey. So we are isolating ourselves. Again, I said it already, what is awful for me is to see how the world is moving fast and how we are on the defensive. We are very much the back on the wall, when during the same time the EU is still the main economic power in the world. We have fantastic technologies, we have fantastic financial possibilities, we have fantastic cultural roots. I believe that our system with more social welfare is the best one in the world, and we are not able to promote that, and we are on our little problems with no solutions. This is what I complain very much, and I understand that the Turkish are very upset, and they have the feeling to have been vexated and very poor by the European Union during the last 20 years. Can we go back to lobbying? So, I suggest to turn page, and you see 4 messages, you click again and you arrive on a curve. You see?
Yeah.
For lobbying, anticipation is key.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, this curve is organized around what we call a co-decision system. The system is the following. The Commission, so the administration, if you wish, has a lot of powers, and in particular, they have the monopoly of legislative initiative. In all the countries, I mean, who can propose law? The government can propose a law, and the parliament can propose a law. This is the case, I think, all democratic countries in the world, but not in Brussels. In Brussels, only the Commission can propose a law. So we have what we call the drafting phase. And then after, when the draft is adopted by the Commission, the draft is submitted to the legislators. And we have 2 legislators. We have the Parliament representing the citizen and the Member State Council of Ministers. And so jointly, the co-legislators have to agree or to modify, but they have to agree on the final text. And this is organized through readings. We have a first reading and a second reading and potentially a third reading. And then after, we have what we call the execution measures, the secondary legislation, the implementing measures. And in all countries, you have all these technical regulations. This is what we call also comitology here in Brussels, which is very technical and very hidden. And here you have 2 curves. The one in dotted lines is the curve post-Lisbon, and the one which is with no dotted line is pre-Lisbon phase. So what do you see here? It's the margins of influence. And you see that ideally, when you are in a lobbying dossier, anticipation is key, and you have to be well informed. You have to know before the draft phase that something good, and you have to intervene before the first word of the first draft is written. This is very key. Generally, people are too late. So you have nothing on the table, you can express your point of view, you are very influential.